Sounds great.
Well, hello, everybody. First thing, little explanation. You're probably wondering why you're looking at my smiling face and not our guest. Our guest is Mr. Joe Grumbine. Joe is the host of Healthy Living by Willow Creek Springs podcast. Great podcast. You need to check it out on alternative medicine. But unfortunately, Joe's been going through a medical situation, so he prefers not to be on camera. But we'll post a pretty picture of him so you can see what Joe looks like. So, Joe, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Well, thank you very much for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, Joe, you've always been a guy that has believed in alternative medicine. I know you've done a lot with plant medicine. Let's just kind of start there. Tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Well, it goes back a long way. I grew up with a history of lung disease, bronchitis and asthma and all this. And my dad was a surgeon. And so I had, the best Western medicine could offer, all the allergy treatments and shots, and I hated it. And when I got into my 20s, I discovered a book about natural medicine and I started reading it. And that opened up the door for me to explore that there's other ways beyond just the shots and pills. And that, I'm 58 now, and it's been a long journey, but I've been walking, growing, making, formulating, testing, and exploring and learning the whole way through. And obviously a half hour isn't going to be enough to get into that, but it goes way back.
Sure, sure. And so your dad was a traditional MD?
Yeah, he was a podiatric surgeon. He was actually on the leading edge. He passed a few years ago, but he developed surgical techniques, and the best Western medicine had to offer.
And so, in your own case, you started your podcast on alternative medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And a short time later, you unfortunately had your own kind of run in with cancer. You want to share with everybody a little bit about what happened?
Oh yeah, it's such an ironic twist. So my dad passes away about 7, 8 years ago. I realized I was gonna be him. I'd started a weight loss journey, started a health journey that was very specific rather than just trying to solve a problem. I'm getting healthy. I lost 50 pounds. I've got a good diet, exercise. I'm getting strong. I start developing this lump on my neck. Eventually, I go to the doctor because, I'm the guy that always says your body will heal itself. Good practices, healthy living, you're going to be okay. This thing wasn't going away. And so finally, I go to this doctor. He goes, well, you're so healthy. If this thing was cancer, it would probably be consuming you by now. So it's probably not, but we should work on it. And of course, that was everything I wanted to hear. I'm like, all right, well, I'll just put that on the shelf. I'll keep being healthy. And eventually I'll get to it. I'm not very vain. I figure I got a lump on my neck, but I'll deal with it. Eventually it doesn't go away. And October 14th of last year, I got my biopsy back and it showed up positive for squamous cell carcinoma, which is a very aggressive head and neck cancer that can devastate a body quickly. And I got this wake up call now. And so I took all this life experience and I was like, okay, well, I'm doing everything right because I'm not eating sugar, I'm not eating carbs, I'm exercising. I start going into the whole, I work with cannabis medicine for 30 years. So I was like, okay, we'll get into the cannabis side of things. We'll go right into it. And I did all the things I knew and it wasn't getting any better. And that was a gigantic wake up call for me. And of course, in the world of, let's put quotes on it, alternative medicine, everybody's an expert, everybody's got a book, everybody has the answer, just do this, just do that, this fruit, this formula, this, it's a one-hit wonder everywhere you go. And of course, as soon as, I got a pretty good community, people love me and care about my work, and they heard about this and like, oh, everybody's showering me with ideas. And, just got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And, you know, you come to realize that you have so much energy to put towards a thing, whatever it is. And as this became more focused and more real, and it was continuing to grow and reaching, I mean, it's wrapping around my carotid artery, pushing into my neck, and it got to a point where I couldn't sleep very well. Pain starts increasing, and I'm like, holy cow, this is the wake up call. And I realized I had to put all my energy into this. And that's when things start to shift. And you start listening different, you start thinking different, you start evaluating things. There's a book by John Kuhn called The Structure of Scientific Revolution. I encourage anybody who's a free thinking person to read that book or listen to it. It helps you to understand how knowledge has come about, how science has evolved, and why sometimes information is there and sometimes it's not. And so you start to learn to judge information differently and resources, and you go, well, where did this person come from and what are they trying to do? Are they selling me something, or are they just trying to help? Are they sharing their experience with me? And that becomes really important. And you start to find people who have shared experiences, and you start communicating with them. And that's sort of a launching point, if you will.
So, what would you say have been the greatest obstacle or obstacles? Because obviously, you've been a healthy guy your whole life, you've done everything right, and then all of a sudden, you get this terrible news from the doctor. I guess there's one of two ways we can go. We get news like that, right? One is depression. The other is I'm going to fight like hell to beat this thing. And obviously, you chose the latter, and my hats off to you. And total respect for doing that. But what would you say the greatest obstacle once you got past the acceptance of the news? What would you say the greatest obstacles have been moving forward?
The greatest obstacle is discerning the truth from all the background noise. If you read The Art of War or whatever, you have to learn your enemy or your adversary. And the thing with cancer is there's all this information out there, but the truth is they don't know. And they know some things, but they don't know how cancer works. They don't know why it does what it does. They don't know all the things that it can do. They know some things, but they don't share the information. And so we live in this information world, right? When I began this journey, I was reading books, going to used bookstores and reading 50-year-old books, trying to learn about herbs. Today, the Smithsonian's at my fingertip. I can go to PubMed and see the most recent published studies, but it cuts both ways. And that's maybe the biggest lesson of everything, is that everything cuts both ways. And in order to find the truth, you have to really put your energy in and learn it. So what I had to do was first learn about cancer as a whole, as a thing or an entity or whatever you want to call it. And then I had to learn about my cancer. And one took a lot of information that could come from multiple sources. The other one had to get really personal. So I had to start spending time at doctors. I had to start getting tests done. I had to start learning about what it is that I have. And the problem, maybe the biggest obstacle, was that the doctors don't agree. And so even in my team, I have a surgeon, a radiation guy, a integrative guy. I've got a chemo person. I've got all these different doctors. And when I talk to each of them separately, they have what they think is the way forward, but it's never harmonious. And so what you have to learn is that you have to be your physician. You have to be the one in charge. You have to direct the action. Otherwise, you'll get pushed down a road that might not be in your best interest. And it's not, people think there's these sinister plots and all this stuff, but really everybody has their point of view and their knowledge base. So if a surgeon is taught surgery, he's not taught about chemo. He's not taught about alternative therapies. He just knows what he knows.
Mm.
And so when you go to talk to him, he's going to tell you from his point of view the thing that he thinks will solve your problem the best. And maybe it will, maybe it won't, but you have to be able to evaluate the whole picture. And that was the biggest obstacle for me. But once I came to a place where I had an understanding, I consider myself today the world's foremost expert on the cancer that I have that's genetically unique to me. There isn't a doctor that knows more than me about mine. And all the doctors together are, and all the experts and all the people and all the herbalists and all the plant medicine people, all of it is where that information came from. But I had to put it together. So that's the tough nut there.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, you've been blessed because at least you had this, this a priori knowledge that a lot of people, that don't, frankly, about plants and about herbs and about, some of the other things that, that you had familiarity with that a lot of people, don't, and they just go one course and they don't even look at some of the other things perhaps that they can do that may not conflict with the traditional way but might help the traditional way, so to speak.
That is 100% true. That was my biggest advantage that I had is I was already interested in physiology and the human body and being healthy. I was already on a mission to make myself the best human I could be. And so I already had some fundamental understandings. And I think that, when I talk to people about health, I look at it this way. I've got this experience with this problem that I'm solving, but really it's a problem that could solve any problem. Somebody could come to me with MS and I'd say, okay, I don't know anything about MS, but let's figure it out. And here's how you do it. And I tell people, the most important thing is you got to get to know you and you got to figure out where you're at and where you want to be. And then you start learning the fundamentals. You go to the basics. If somebody decides they want to, become a football player, well, great. You go to a football camp and you start doing push-ups. You don't start running passes. You have to learn how to be an athlete. And so the same thing, you got to learn about fundamentals. You got to learn about sleep and diet, exercise, stress, and all the other components of health. And then you got to start to evaluate yourself. And then you got to look at your problem or your goal it might be, and then you start bridging the gap and finding sources of information. So it's really get back to basics like anything, really.
Hey, you're incorporating obviously, traditional, allopathic doctors along the way, but you're also working with alternative docs. I want to talk about the alternative docs if we can, Joe. How do you find a good one? Because I get this question all the time. How do I find a good alternative doc, or for that matter, a traditional doc who's incorporating, some of the other things, be it acupuncture, be it, pharmacognosy, be it, different things, stem cells. I mean, all the different things that are
Absolutely.
popular today. How do you find that guy or that gal that
You
is,
know, that is one of the most difficult, but it really has to do with what I'm building with this community is, sort of, I don't know, here we got this, I don't know if it's even still around, but there was a contractor group called Angie's List. And
yeah.
it was really a referral program where people would rate, contractors and say, well, this guy's all right. And I used him, and this is what my experience was. It really comes down to community and engagement and getting in there and doing the work, starting to talk to people, knock on doors, and putting the work in. And it doesn't happen easily. You go to any resource, any network, you're going to find marketing. So the guy who spends the most money on marketing is going to be the first up. It's just always going to be that way. That doesn't mean he's going to be the best person. A lot of times, the best practitioner is a terrible businessman, but they're booked solid because word of mouth has kept them that way. And that's why you really got to get into the trenches and start talking to people who share your experience. You got to put the effort in. You got to make phone calls. You got to try. And eventually, what happens is I've been to many practitioners that I was like, well, you were just trying to sell me your machine, or you're trying to sell me your potion or your thought or your idea. And after a while, you start to get some discernment. The judge can spot the liar pretty quick. Why? Because he sees a million of them. Um, you don't spend your time talking to people, and after a while, and you get, caught up with the marketing, the flashy things and the whatever. And it really takes that effort. And it really, when in this world of health, I just really have to say there's two elements. One is, the angels and the blessings and the love and the love. Somebody comes and just hands you the thing you need. That's going to be maybe 5% if you're lucky. The other 95% is going to be you getting out there and putting that effort in and talking to people. And that's what this community I'm building is about. When somebody comes to me to consult about anything, I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you everything I know. Maybe I know something I can help, maybe not, but I can at least put it into my network of people that I know and trust. And this includes, like you were talking about, there's herbalists, there's acupuncturists, chiropractors, integrative doctors, and that's another sort of a new. I don't know that it's new, but it's being identified as a concept of doctors that incorporate Western medicine but integrate other therapies. We have to realize that there's well-known treatments that are out there, but they're not FDA approved, and they're not ever going to be marketed by the pharma companies because patents are expired. That doesn't mean they're not good. That just means you're not going to hear somebody send you a TV commercial about them.
Hmm.
And there's also every kind of snake oil out there that you can imagine. So the second a trend comes on, then there's 1,000 products that are leaping on that trend. And that's where that book I was telling you about, paradigms eventually shift, but it takes a long time before the hucksters catch up to the truth. And so you have to navigate through all that. And that's where you immersing yourself in it and getting to learn the language and meeting people that have had experience. That's your most powerful ally, is find somebody who shares a thing that you did and get to spend time with them and learn what they did that worked. And that's your most powerful tools.
It's interesting because I think I shared with you when I was on your show. I was an athlete, but I was born
Mhm.
with a spinal condition called spondylolisthesis, and it's affected me through the years, and of course, all the sports related injuries. So about 2 years ago, I got referred to a chiropractor here in the Dallas area, and I started going to him. And at the same time, my orthopedist said, I think you would be benefit. I think you would benefit by stem cells. Ironically, I go to that chiropractor the same week, and he has a orthopedist coming into his practice once a week that now gives stem cells. So,
There you go.
we're seeing a good, what I think is a good trend.
Oh yeah,
There was a time a chiropractor and an orthopedist wouldn't have a cup of coffee in the same restaurant, right?
exactly,
Today, these
exactly.
are saying, hey, you know what? If we can help the patient, because the patient is what's important, if we can help them, let's work together. And we're starting to, not in a lot of cases, but we're starting to see that maybe more so. You're in California, I'm in Texas. These states are a
Right.
little more, progressive in terms of how people think and what the consumer demands, maybe in some of the other states. But I think that's
Sure.
a healthy trend that we're seeing is these folks starting to kind of work together in a line and say, what do you know that I don't, and vice versa? Where can we help the patient most importantly? So I think that's a great thing. So let me ask you another thing. Your diet when you got the cancer, were you plant based? Were you eating a traditional American diet? Were you watching your diet? And is
You
it?
know, I ate whatever I wanted prior to my dad passing away. I realized I needed to lose some weight. I began a journey that started basically pulling sugar out first and then carbs. It was a fairly ketogenic diet. I was doing intermittent fasting. Fasting's a big part of my experience, and that's a whole conversation. But then when I got diagnosed, I realized that I got cancer. So I wasn't even eating fruit. That was a big part of it. But in my research, I ran into this guy who in all of this networking and talking and meeting people came over to my house. He's a alternative doctor in San Diego, and we were talking about my diet, and he said you can't have meat if you have cancer. And then he talked about this amino acid. And I didn't even hear it, but somehow it stuck in my head. And then as I continued on, I was doing research and looking at papers and whatnot. And all of a sudden, the a paper about an amino acid called methionine came up.
Mhm.
And I started going down a rabbit hole. I felt pulled to that. And it just comes as you're in a place and you find yourself directed to spend more time with this. I ended up meeting a guy named Dr. Robert Hoffman in San Diego, and this guy's published 80% of the papers on methionine and cancer's addiction to it. And I have connected with him. He actually a regular guest on my show now, and I've incorporated a diet that is low in methionine, which means I had to go vegan. I hate it. I love meat and eggs and dairy and all of that, but I my cancer does too. And it turns out that cancer is addicted to methionine, which is an amino acid. And I have crafted a huge portion of my stacked regimen around this diet and fasting. And it's been instrumental in the value of the Western chemo treatment that I've taken. I've had a dramatic result. Since we last spoke, my tumor's reduced by noticeably. And it's in large part of this diet that I'm dealing with and restricting methionine, and it's a big deal.
I mean, you mentioned fasting, and of course, something I'm very familiar with. Have you looked at any of the studies out of True North that some of the guys that Goldhammer and his partner have worked with through the years?
Oh, absolutely.
Phenomenal stuff. Phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Fasting is key to health. Any way you look at it, from ancient history till today, if you're going to be healthy, you will be fasting in some fashion for sure.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. You look at it historically: Jesus, Moses,
All the way.
Gandhi. I mean, you go through the list of the who's who, and every one of them fasted. Every major religion in the world has a fasting component to it. So you're absolutely right. How have you used the fasting? I mean, are you water fast only? Or are you doing juice fast? How have you?
I I have had to modulate things, and it's gotten very complicated because I'm in this personal experience. But generally, I water fast, and that to me means black coffee, black tea, and that's it. Um, and water, and that's it. And generally, 72 hours is about where I go. I've gone longer, but where I am today with my weight, if I fast too much, I start tapping into my muscle, which releases methionine from my own body, and the cancer feeds off of me. So it's a whole different layer right now. But when it was just weight loss, intermittent fasting on the regular, the key with fasting to me was don't do too many things the same for too long. You got to switch it up or your body adjusts. And so, 72-hour fast once a month is healthy for everybody. I would highly encourage it if you can handle it. 24-hour fast once a week. That's a beautiful kickstart to anybody's health journey.
Exactly. Hey, that fellow that you mentioned, is it John Kuhn? Is it Kuhn, or how's it spelled?
Yes, yeah, yeah. John Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolution. Powerful.
I'm
And
going to read that book, and I would suggest our listeners do as well. We have many, many, many health, both practitioners and just folks interested in their health. So, Joe, let's switch gears a little bit here. How does somebody have an adult discussion, with their family when they get something like you have? How do they, how do you approach it? Not only letting them know the bad news, obviously, but also the hey, here's my strategy and tactics that I'm going to use to beat this thing.
what I would highly recommend is if you're battling something as severe as this, let that be your focus. the people around you, your family, your loved ones, they're going to come to you as they need to. It's not your job or your obligation to announce anything to anybody. It's your job to get yourself alive and stay that way and focus your attention on that. And I would highly say that your attitude and the decisions that you make are the only thing you have control over. And I would say take control over those things and make those decisions that say, I'm going to do everything I can to get me to these goals of health. And when somebody comes to you, decide where your energy is going to go. Everybody was going to want to know all the details and everything. And that's one of the reasons I have put all that in the podcast. I just tell people if you want to hear about it, I have subscriber episodes. You can hear it all there. I can't tell you over and over. We deplete ourselves of energy every which way. We're watching social media, we're gossiping, we're spending our time working and all these things. And how much energy you put to your healing is going to directly affect the results you get. So pick the people that actually care, and you'll know that because they'll spend time with you. These are the people that are sharing your life. Everybody else that wants to hear the story, you're going to deplete yourself telling it. So that's maybe it might not be what everybody wants to hear, but it's been instrumental in my journey. There's members of my family that don't even know, or maybe I just haven't talked to them. It's okay. I have a family of people that know and are part of my life, and that's I share everything with. And that's really what I've done is focus that energy.
And how would you say this has changed, changed you on a personal level? Okay. So
Oh boy. I can tell you this. 6 months ago, I was entirely a different person. And everything that I knew and everything that I thought I knew and everything that I was or thought I was, when I accepted this challenge and when I've gone through many journeys with plant medicine and all different things. And at one point I was given a question in my mind or in my heart and said, what are you willing to do for this? And I said, whatever it takes. And what I meant, when I made that decision and I meant it, it affected me completely. And I got to tell you, John, as this is the most difficult thing I've ever experienced. I've been closer to death than ever before and than ever I want to be again. This has been the greatest blessing of my life. It has changed me in ways that have opened my mind, opened my heart, opened my purpose, opened my passion. And the fact that we're having a conversation just tells me that you're a part of it. So I appreciate that.
listen, yeah, you're a brave guy, and love the approach that you're taking. And it's you can't relate to it. I mean, I thank the good Lord I haven't had something like that happen in my life, and I think most of our listeners probably would share that. But some of them are battling their own things, and you're brave how you've approached it, but you've also seek the answers. And what I think one of the blessings that we have today that maybe people 30, 40 years ago didn't have was we do have this wealth of information about alternative medicine, traditional medicine that is at our fingertips, right? Pick up our phone and go to Google and say, okay, what about this? What about that? Go to WebMD and all these other search engines. So that was one of my questions, Joe. Is as you
PubMed.
PubMed, as you've gone down this road, uh,
PubMed has the science and the published papers, peer reviewed. If you want information that you can count on, at least that isn't tossed up by some huckster, that's a resource that you can rely on. There's so many more, and it's not in any way the definitive one answer. But if you want something to weigh what other people are saying, take it and toss it in there and see what comes up. And I would say that's probably the best advice I could give.
I think the studies there too, and none of them are sponsored studies by whoever paid for them, right? I mean,
Or
they're
if they are, they say it. They show the conflict of interest. So you got to do your work. There's tens of thousands of published papers there, but if you do your work, you can find answers there.
so let's go back to your podcast. So
Yes.
Healthy Living by Willow Creek Springs. Willow Creek Springs an actual place, or is that it's
It is a place. It's also a company. For 20 years, my wife and I have been formulating and manufacturing natural skincare and health remedies. Unfortunately, this has upended all that for now, and we're keeping it alive. But right now, I'm just keeping myself alive. But it's also a place. We have a 2.5 acre botanical garden between LA and San Diego, and we have a botanical garden and a nonprofit called Gardens of Hope that's tied to it. But the place we named 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we named it Willow Creek Springs. So that's what that is.
I haven't been there, Joe, but next time I come to SoCal, I'm coming to visit you because Willow Creek Springs sounds like the kind of place to bring a good book and sit there
Oh,
and enjoy.
I would love to have you visit, and you'll love it.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about the show. I mean, I've listened to it. I'm a fan of your show, but tell our listeners as well, because
Absolutely. So my podcast, it's a very wide-ranging podcast, Healthy Living. It covers a lot of ground. So I have doctors, practitioners, I have people that have overcome ailments. I have people that have businesses and products and services. And it also created a platform for me to journal my journey. And so I've got subscriber section where I kind of have my diary of this process, and I go deep and raw with that. For a couple of bucks somebody can access that. Most of the content's free, and it is it's really starting to take off. I don't know what I'm doing. I just do it, and over time, doing it long enough, people have started to come to me. The guests, quality of guests have improved. The listenership has exponentially grown, and it's starting to take a life of its own. So I'm excited. I did it initially to create a community, and now I'm looking at a community. So it's really been a tool that has helped bring my dream together. And it's we're a couple hundred episodes into it now.
great, great. Well, I've enjoyed listening to it. I'm sure our listeners will too. So, Joe, just kind of wrap it up today. What's next on the Joe agenda?
Well, I am just marching forward. I have seen the end in my spiritual realm, and I know I'm healed. I have to walk a very difficult road to get there. It's a very complicated regimen that's involving chemotherapy, fasting, diet, oxygen therapy, many stacks of therapy. It really just takes most of my time to manage it. And then I'm trying to document it best as I can and keep myself alive financially a little bit. And that's really my life right now.
Right. Well, listen, continued good health, most importantly. Continue being you. You're an inspiration to all of us, and we'll be hoping and praying for nothing but strength and continued wisdom to get the answers that you need, my friend.
I appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Likewise.
All right. Take care.